96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. When I was a young man, I was in Los Angeles and I was coming back to Florida, and this was in the days before we had the internet or cell phones or anything like that. And I was in a bus station. Yes, I was taking a bus all the way across the country. I didn't see anything wrong with that at the time, actually. Anyway, they had these little TVs, if you can remember, little TVs. And we had to put a quarter into the TV in order to get it to come on for a half hour. And I was watching a black and white TV, and the TV show All in the Family was on. I'm just setting it up for something. So anyway, so in the seat next to me, there's another TV, a really pretty young girl sits next to me and starts to chat with me. And of course, you know, when you're a young man or even an old man, a young pretty girl starts to talk to you, it gets your attention, right?
Yeah.
Well, she was asking me if I knew, if she said, if I told you that Jesus Christ was up in the mountains outside Santa Monica, would you come with me? And I said, well, no, I got to go home. I got to go home to Florida. Yeah, but it's, what if it was Jesus Christ? I said, well, is it? She said, well, I don't know. I said, wait a minute. I think I saw a movie about this. Does everybody wear sheets? What? I said, is this a cult? No. It's a religion. It's called Christianity, and Jesus Christ is in the mountains. Well, this is 1977. This happened, okay, just to give you some reference. 2018, I don't think he's come out of the mountain yet. I haven't heard. But I'm so glad I didn't follow this young lady. I mean, she certainly was attractive enough, and kind of a way to lure people, I guess, into something. I don't know what would attract a young lady to do something that would bring you into the grips of a cult. But we have somebody on the phone who had that happen to her, and did not have All in the Family on the TV to kind of distract her. Tarra Judson Stariell, I hope I'm saying her name right. She has quite a story to talk to you about. She has a book called Sanity, Lost and Found. It's a true story of brainwashing and recovery. It's like a 15 years. Oh my gosh. She is now a licensed marriage and family therapist. She survived the childhood trauma and distant parents that led to the psychological clutches of a sociopath whose cult consumed 15 years of her life. Let's find out about this one. Sanity, Lost and Found. Tarra Judson Stariell. Good morning, Tarra. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you ended up with a happy ending here. When did this happen? Where are you first? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from San Diego, California.
Okay. You're not too far from where this other nutcase was. So where were you? Where were you when this happened?
I was actually in San Diego. I met him there. I had come back from Peace Corps, and I was looking for a way to translate a message that I had been given while I was in Peace Corps, and it was rejected, and I was feeling very alienated from my family, and I ran across someone who said, I can help you get this message out to the world, and I can help you get closer to God. And having gone through many different modalities, I studied Christianity. Many of the different world religions were what I had studied, and I didn't find a way to get this message across. And he said, yes, I can help you. He was very charismatic. And
really?
There were 6 of us in all. We wanted to change the world.
When was this? Give me a time frame.
This was in the 70s. 1979 was when I met him. And I actually was with him for about 12 years, and then it took, after I left in 1991, it took a great many years to heal and recover from all of that abuse and brainwashing.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. What was the message you wanted to get out to the world?
I had a rather unusual experience. I was in Colombia, and they embraced mysticism, and this pillar of light appeared to me and said that you need to go back to your home and let people know that the world as you know it, is not going to continue. Life on planet Earth is not going to continue if people continue to live the way that they are. And I thought I was going crazy. And a bunch of more information went through my brain, and I was really quite satisfied with Peace Corps and had found value for perhaps the first time in my life. And it really strange experiences kept plaguing me, and eventually I returned to the States to share this message, and of course it wasn't well received.
Where were you serving in the Peace Corps? Where were you stationed?
In Colombia.
Oh, that's right. You said that. I'm sorry. All right. So,
That's all right.
And where did you meet? Do we have a name for the guy? Fictional, and not just so we can refer to him?
His name was Solar.
Solar. Well, that's a clue right there.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Right.
okay. So, where did you meet Solar?
In the Southern California area.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry you said that too. All right. And so, can I be on? Can I ask you honestly? Were you attracted to him?
I was attracted to the ideas. I think, we eventually formed a romantic relationship, is what most leaders do. They kind of cross all your boundaries. And I was really attracted to the idea. The notion he offered me was a spiritual enlightenment program where I could really divest myself of the depression, the rejection, all of the failed experiences I had to try to share this message. And
See, it's just like a man. It's just like a man. I mean, you have the spiritual experience. You see the column of light, but he knows more than you. He's going to explain it to you. Oh, my gosh. I'm so sorry that we are that way. I'm so sorry.
Well, not all men are like that, and not all women are vulnerable. If you've been molested or had medical traumas or any kind of trauma, we end up being incredibly vulnerable and lacking in self-esteem enough to discern. Well, maybe he doesn't have all my answers, but when you get set up like that, people lack that internal structure and look outside of themselves for someone to lead them to the way.
So physically, what happened? Did you move in with him? Did you move to a farm? Did he have lots of people who were under his spell?
That came later. Actually, I quit my job and divested myself of all my property, and we moved into a house together. I moved away from where I had been, and in order to purify my mind, I had to enter into this non-interactive program, which meant that no news, no contact with family, friends, relatives. He really restricted my movements. I stayed in this little room. I wasn't allowed to go outside. So all of my choices, which is a hallmark of if you're getting into something like that, you're getting into trouble. Someone's taking over your choices. They're making your decisions for you. And so it was an insidious process. He kept saying, well, you want to get closer to God? And I said, yes. Well, then trust me, this is how you need to do this.
Oh, my gosh.
Even though I doubted it, was like, well, okay.
And sometimes people inadvertently do that. I mean, they patronize somebody else and try to make them feel like they're important or they're smart or something like that. Yes.
But yeah, if you have a goal or a perception of something that you want, you need, that you think someone else can help you get, that you don't believe you can do, you start divesting yourself of your own personal power. And the more central it is to your well-being, the more power you're willing to invest. It's like selling your soul to the devil type of thing.
Can you see these signs in some certain children that are growing up?
Yes. When children are what we call emotionally vulnerable, they lack assertiveness, they aren't able to regulate their emotions, they are socially withdrawn, they usually lack healthy friends. Children will flock together with other wounded children. They say poor school performance. They're not willing to try new things. They don't trust themselves to try new things because they don't have a lot of self-assurance, and or they might have a need for things to be perfect, and they have perhaps exaggerated fears of failing. They're really reclusive. They isolate. The internet's a great place for kids to lose themselves, but we're talking about someone who's feeling unworthy. Someone who's been rejected, doesn't have a lot of social contacts.
Where is Solar today?
I believe he's dying of a terminal illness, and I wrote him a forgiveness letter because I realized that hating him for the rest of my life would be like dosing myself with poison, expecting him to die. And that was one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because I think that we need to find out what our part is when we allow someone to take advantage of us or abuse us. And I'm talking about adults, not children.
Right.
And so I worked through all that. Anyway, excuse me.
The book, no, excuse me, I interrupted you. The book and your message now, I'm just curious, looking at it from the age you are now, being able to look back at it with maybe a little bit clearer vision,
Hopefully.
what was he really doing? What was his real mission, I guess?
Well, he claimed that all of us were very negative and we had to have our souls cleansed, and that was what justified the abuse. But for me, I can't speak for the others, but for me, what I realized was that he became the mirror of my own self-hatred and rejection of myself. I mean, the negative things that had happened to me, I internalized and interpreted that I was bad, that there must be something wrong with me.
Oh my gosh. I wish
But that's what children do. That's what
How old
people
were you?
do.
How old were you?
Well, I was 29 when I met him.
Right.
29, yeah, 30
So
something, yeah.
well, and that's still young enough to be impressionable. But are you saying that part of your vulnerability stemmed from abuse you had outside of him, before him, earlier in your life?
Not abuse. Yeah, not abuse so much as the rejection and neglect of my own developmental needs. So, when children are subjected to medical traumas, molestation, or they have a parent who's absent. My mother was quite depressed, had suffered great losses, wasn't really able to be there, so it's not her fault, it's just circumstances. And a number of traumas just kept happening. And then I was doing pretty well, and then the paranormal stuff just kind of set me off the edge.
Did you have any friends in the cult?
No, we weren't allowed to
my
have
God.
eye contact, to talk, to reality test, really, because if you look at someone, you start what we call self-regulating. You start coming back into reality. Like, really, you think that too? And maybe
that's exactly why I was asking. Because
Right.
I'm thinking,
yeah.
I'm wishing you had some redneck there that said to you, "Hey, come on, this guy's pulling one over
Yeah,
on you."
right.
Or maybe one of the
Let's get out of here.
maybe
Yeah.
a greaser from New York, or a Harley guy like my brother, somebody like that who could say, "Come on, this guy's full of it.
Yeah.
Go get a pretzel."
Let's get out of here. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's what people need. That's what keeps and insulates people from getting, hooked into these kinds of things. There's someone who says, "This isn't right. Come on."
Yeah.
You had said that you would leave him periodically, but you would always be drawn back. How come you weren't strong enough to leave the first time?
The situation when human beings have been hurt by someone, we create what's called a trauma bond, and it's actually a frozen place. We have these defenses called fight, flight, freeze, and if someone has hurt us and we've given them the ability to hurt us, we start fearing them, and there's a certain amount of helplessness that can take over. And so psychologically, I was imprisoned by my trauma bond with him. So even though I left because I just got fed up, I would, it's like having a hypnotic trance just kind of take over. I would go back over and over again, believing him and all his promises that this time he wouldn't hurt me, this time, things would be different. It's a classic battered wife syndrome where what you're getting is a big enough payoff until the diminishing returns happen. It's like a drug addict, using their drug because it operates from the same place in the brain. You continue to use a drug even though family and friends, you lose your job,
Right.
You're homeless. And then eventually, if you are lucky enough to wake up to go, this isn't right, then people go into recovery, and then they find out how they were filled with shame, they didn't like themselves, and they continue to act that out in their lives.
I have a personal question, and if it's and if it's too personal, just say next or something. I mean, did he have many sexual partners, and were you one of them?
Yes, that's a hallmark of cults. Jim Jones slept with people, apparently men and women, and even though people were married, he would take their wives. Rajneesh did the same thing. That's one of the things that they all do. It's a way to take over someone, is to just destroy their boundaries. And so our body is a very important boundary. What we think is another. He would say, did you think of your past today? Anything that had happened to us before we met him was considered foreboding. So we were at first disciplined, and then we were actually hurt physically for having those kinds of thoughts. So it's a total taking over of a person's psyche, their body, and using them sexually is a way to make someone very subservient.
The book came out in November. Have you had any readers who've written to you and said, "Oh my gosh, this almost happened to me. This did happen to me. It's happening right now, and I think I'm seeing the light now"? Have you had that kind of feedback?
Not yet. My website is under construction, and I'll probably have an opportunity. I have had a few personal experiences of people that I have met that have had similar, not cults, but there's abuse. The Me Too movement is huge right now in terms of people finding their voices and thinking that they didn't have a right. So there's a lot of that going.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Going around.
In a way, this guy, what's his name again? The guy that started all this Me Too, the director. No, not that guy.
I don't remember.
What's his name?
Weinstein? Harvey Weinstein.
In a way, he's like a cult leader. In a way, he was doing the same thing, controlling people.
From his position of power.
Right, and it was about sex. It's
about control. It's actually using the same mechanisms. I have, these gals wanted acting jobs, and so you do what you think you need to do because you give up your power, and that's how people are then held captive. Bill Cosby did the same thing. It's rampant in our culture, and I hope we can teach people about how the brain works.
Thank you.
And how to insulate ourselves from this kind of predatory behavior.
Since in the beginning you said you liquidated all of your assets and everything, and technically you gave it all to him. Once you left for the final time, where did you go? How were you able to do something without money and rebuild your life?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking. All woven all throughout this experience, my grandmother continued and consistently offered me unconditional love, and every now and then we would land on her doorstep, which really kind of awakened some of my true self. It kind of came temporarily out of the trance. Well, when it was all said and done, I ended up on her doorstep, and I had my driver's license and the clothes I was wearing, and that was it. Oh, and a comb. And I said, Grandma, I finally left him. Can I stay with you? And actually, it kind of moves me just to recall it. And she said, of course. And so here she was at 91, and she had another child to raise because I was very broken, very battered. And anyway, I went into therapy and found that I needed to study psychology to find out how that had happened to me. And I lived on our old family farm, and it was such a healing place, such a sanctuary. And that's where I kind of went back to my roots and healed with my family and healed with myself and educated myself and did what I hope everybody realizes they have an opportunity to do, is to to use the worst of circumstances to make the best of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a story. Do you have any brothers or sisters, any siblings?
I had a brother, a very dear brother, who also passed away, and I wrote about that in the book because he was also a huge champion and was, such a huge loss. But and I think that we all need to learn how to deal with losses.
Did you have any did you have any communication at all with your brother or your family during those 15 or 12 years?
My brother actually tried to intervene, and I was so terrified that I wouldn't talk with him, and then they actually did intervene, and I ended up in a loony bin for a while, just long enough so I could prove that I didn't belong there. But the psychological programming was still so deeply embedded, I went right back into the bowels of hell. So.
Did you ever, after you were healed, and since you're helping others now, have you ever seen any more visions? Well,
I talk to God every day, all day long, but no, I just pray for guidance and to be used. I mean, it was really difficult to write this and to be public about all the shenanigans I've done. I had a tremendous amount of shame about allowing someone to destroy me like that.
If I could just be a big brother for a second, you're nothing to be ashamed of. Somebody took advantage of you. How did he pay his bills? Did you actually earn money for him? Yes.
And of course, we all had assets that we brought to him. And he had this amazing following that, people, he was so charismatic. It was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, so his public persona was incredibly soft, genteel, charismatic, and people just gushed with money to him, and it was quite a phenomenal process. You can see how these people can, take the widow's last penny type thing. It's quite interesting.
Well, he's got a terminal illness. I hate to be the guy who says good for him.
Yeah, but good for him. God takes care of everybody.
He doesn't sound like somebody I'd be rooting for. Did he?
Well, actually, I do pray for him because he's quite a troubled man.
I know. I hear what you're saying, and you're right. But did he ever learn? Did he ever wake up? Did he ever say, "Oh my gosh, I was so bad"? Did he ever come out and say, "You know what? I am so sorry"? Did that ever happen?
Not to my awareness. He did when it was convenient to get us back. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have hurt you. I shouldn't have beaten you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But then it lasted. Yeah, and then once you're back in, forget about it.
The colleges don't offer courses on manipulation, but he would be a great professor. Sounds like.
Well, he had a master's degree in criminal psychology, so they know how to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Tarra, what an honest and brave person you are. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think you're saving people's sanities. The book is called Sanity, Lost and Found. I would direct you to Amazon. That's where I found it. Do you have a website of your own? Oh, you said you're working on it.
It's under construction. Yeah, Sanity, Lost and Found, and it's soon to be launched probably in 2 weeks.
All right. In the meantime, you can find the book on Amazon. Thank you so much, Tarra. And anytime, if you have another book or you just want to come back on, we'd love to have you again.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to meet both of you. Speak with you.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster. Nicknamed America's Pastor, the Reverend Billy Graham died this morning at his home in North Carolina, 99 years old.
If you remember nothing that I say tonight, except one thing I want you to remember. God loves you.
President Trump just tweeted, "The great Billy Graham is dead. There was nobody like him. He'll be missed by Christians and all religions. A very special man." About 100 survivors of last week's school shooting in Parkland, Florida took an 8-hour bus ride